Okay, today I'm going to share a couple of two or three of my favorite knots that I've learned over the years. There's lots of different knots you can tie and lots of different pretty complicated ones, but I generally use the same two or three for just about everything. And a lot of them that I used to know I've forgotten just because I don't use them anymore because I use these same two or three. When I was a real young boy, Daddy would take me in the woods hunting with him, and I wasn't old enough to hunt yet, but he'd take me with him, just kind of introducing me to it. And he would always take a piece of string or rope or something with him, and he would teach me how to tie knots. And once I was kind of concentrating on trying to tie the knot, I would be quiet, and that was his way of keeping me quiet so I wouldn't talk and make noise and scare the deer off. He was watching for deer while I was trying to learn how to tie the knots, and that was how he kept me from making too much noise. Later on, as I got a little older and I learned some of these knots, I used them quite regularly, especially in the woods hunting and fishing. You got to know a few knots. I mean, it's always handy to know, and we always carried some kind of cordage or rope or something with me. So you got to know how to tie and how to use it and how to tie some of the knots that don't get so tight that you can't get them back out. And then later on, even further on, as I got older and started working, I worked a lot of construction jobs. And a lot of the jobs I was on, I got to noticing the crane companies that were lifting stuff up pretty high, they had a rigging crew. So I got to watching the rigging crew, how they tied their knots, and was kind of fascinated with it because those guys are really, really good, and they know what they're doing, and they have to know what they're doing, in order to keep everybody safe. And I just I caught on to some of those, and I've forgotten a lot of them, but there's two or three that I still use today that I basically learned just from watching those guys on some of the construction jobs I was on. Okay, now I'm going to show you some of the knots that I use the very most often. And I really don't know what some of them's called, but this one's just like an overhand loop. You just create a loop in the end of the string and tie an overhand knot and back through itself, and that creates just a freestanding loop in the end of it. And it don't slide or anything, it's just a loop. And I use that tying stuff on a truck. You can use that loop to run the string back through itself, and it will pull tight around something. And then you can come further up if you wanted to secure it more and tie what's called a half hitch in it. You just create a loop up here and go over top of, or over the end of whatever it is you're trying to secure, and pull that tight. And then if you want to, you can do it one more time. And this is one of the ones that I saw the riggers use when they would want to pick something up with a crane vertically, something long and round, and it will hold it vertically in the air. And then it won't slip, because the tighter you pull the other end of the string, the tighter it chokes these knots together, and it's very secure. And I use this a whole lot tying stuff on the truck or pretty much anything. Now you can also do this same thing. It's a little more complicated. Tie this same loop in the end with what's called a bowline knot or bowline knot. And how to do that is to come down 6-8 inches on the string and grab the string and just pull it up into a loop. And then bring this end down back through that loop and around your string and back through. I think there's a little some kind of little like nursery rhyme saying something about a rabbit and back through the hole, but I can't remember what it is. And you pull that tight, and it does the same thing and creates a loop in the end that will remain there, and it doesn't slide either, although there is a knot called a running bowline that does this same thing, but this loop will slip up and down, but I don't know how to tie that one. I've not tied it in probably 30 years. But I don't use it, so I don't really need it, but I use this one occasionally. This knot is called, I think it's called a necklace knot or a sliding knot, or you could use it just to tie up 2 tag ends of a rope that's kind of long after you've tied something. You just cross each rope or each end of the rope and just tie an overhand knot back to the tag end of that rope, just like that. And then do the same thing with this one. Just an overhand knot. Now what you've done is created a circle, but it's adjustable. You can grab these 2 knots and pull outward, and it will make the circle smaller. Or you can pull on the main rope, and then the circle will get bigger, and then these two knots will slide together. And then as you pull them tight, they just bite into each other, and the more you pull, the tighter they get. And that's a good way to secure 2 tag ends of rope, and that way they're not, if you're like in the back of a truck or something, it's not flapping in the wind going down the road. And it's fairly easy to get back apart. Just pull the 2 knots away from each other and they slide apart. You can actually, why it's called a necklace knot, if you're making a necklace out of a piece of string or something, you can throw that around your neck, and then you can adjust the length of that circle, and that would adjust the size of your necklace, I guess. Another one that my dad taught me in the woods, and I've used it all my life long, is what's called a square knot. And it's just 2 overhand knots that are, you tie the first part of the overhand knot one way, and then you bring the loop back together, and then you tie the other one the opposite way. You go over one rope and under the next time, and as you pull it, it creates what looks like a square. And the tighter you pull it, the more it bites onto itself. And it's a very, very, very strong knot, and it won't slip. And the best part about it is, it's very easy to get back apart. You just push, and it comes back apart. And I've used it for many, many years, ever since I learned it when I was a boy. Okay, this knot is called a Prusik knot, and this is actually one of my, comes off my harness on my safety belt that I deer hunt with. And it actually came pre-tied, and it's knotted up, but I took it off the rope just for the purpose of putting it back on to show you how it works. So this being in a loop goes over the main line of this rope, and you just take this knot back through that loop and all the way around. Right? And it goes around it 3 times. There's one time. It's going back through the second time, and then it gets kind of tight, but once you get through, it loosens back up, and you go through the 3rd time, and then you kind of pull it all tight. Now you can see that it's got, each side of this main rope has 3 wraps on top, 3 wraps on the bottom. And you pull that tight, and what that does is, or this particular one does, the lanyard on the safety harness buckles into this loop, and it's adjustable even though it's very, very tight. If you pull pressure on it really hard, the more you pull, the more it bites the rope and it won't slide. And your main safety line to the tree stand harness is hooked to this, so if you fall, a sudden jerk, it bites that line and it keeps you from falling out of the tree. You'll bounce off the side of the tree and probably get skinned, but that's better than hitting the ground. And if you need to adjust it, you just pull it. You can make it longer, or you can make it shorter. It's just like a little rope barrel that moves up and down the main rope. But just as soon as you put pressure on this loop end, it bites into the rope really, really hard. And it's a very secure knot. I think a lot of climbers use it. And like I say, it works great for a tree stand harness, and it's very safe. You could actually use this like on a tarp line if you were camping. You could, to make your tarp, adjustable, you could tie the grommets of your tarp to something like this and slide it to tighten your tarp. You could have one of these on each end of your main line and tighten your tarp up, or you could go back the other way and make it a little bit looser if you wanted to drop your tarp down closer to the ground, like when you go to bed, if you're like in a hammock or something. And it works really good for that also. And I'm sure there's other uses for it, but that's pretty much what I know how to use it for. But it's a really, really safe, really strong knot. And again, it's called a Prusik knot. So this is just some of the knots that I use and some of the ones that I know. I know there's lots and lots and lots of them, and there's lots of people know way more about it than I do, but this is just what I use, and it's always worked and served me well, especially in the woods, hunting and fishing and working. And as a maintenance guy, we have to do, we have to tie and secure loads down on trucks and stuff a whole lot, and occasionally we'll have to pull something upside of the building with a rope or something, and I'm usually the one that gets to do that. But knowing just a few basic knots like this is a really good thing to know and a good tool to have. And there's lots of references you can find online to learn many more of them than I know, and we'll leave links to those below.